everybody, sorry for the delay. This is back to Anna Reed's and my filthy pollen-encrusted cat, Luther. Yeah? Oh, you boot my nose. What you boot my nose for? Yeah, you're cute. You are covered in pollen. You're so cute. Look at the kitty on the camera. Look at... No. Okay, now I have a mouthful of cat hair. Oof. All right, so we are back with Unmentionable, the Victorian Lady's Guide to Sex, Marriage, and Manners by Teresa O'Neill. We don't have much left. This will be chapter 14. Come on, chapter 14. Da-da-da! Page 14, and I am going to need a beer for this. We have Midnight Rider from Piedmont Brewery in downtown Macon, over on 3rd Street. If you are in Macon, I'm pretty sure Piedmont is still doing curbside pickup. Please go support our local businesses. This is going to be a really crappy time, so we're all in it together. We're all here to help each other. And right now, here's one for you, Dwayne Allman, the Midnight Rider. Cracking open a cold one. We don't commit alcohol abuse here. Chapter 14, The Secret Vice, where warts and tiny nipples come from. We have, Orson Squire Fowler opening the chapter with, "Can all sexual evil be cured? For if not, our race is a stupendous failure." For as much of a lunatic as this guy is, I really can't help but agree with him sometimes. Just sometimes. Back in the 21st century, masturbation was a personal choice. Many of us in the Western world give it no more significance than scratching an itch. Our beloved partners could scratch it better, perhaps, with the special rhythm we've developed together through trial and error. But should they have already fallen asleep or in fact not exist, well, many of us keep our own back scratchers by the bed. Still, some of us believe the habit to be unhealthful, and we spend our most sensuous and hormonal years burying the urge or sating it with substitutes like 1960s era musicals and imported cheeses. Hey, you leave my obsession with West Side Story out of this. Out of this, I tell you. We may consider it a religious transgression, or we may believe it just isn't good for us. Fewer of us believe it will give us finger warts, turn our breasts small and sloppy, and strike us down with bona fide catatonia. We're pretty sure it can't drive us mad or make us sterile, and we'd be downright shocked to find ourselves dead from it. I'm reasonably sure there's a couple of Florida Man headlines that might disagree with that, but please, just don't be Florida Man, okay? Not so in the 19th century. Self-abuse, or masturbation, was considered terrible for your health and your happiness. That is one of the main reasons I believe electric vibrators were never professionally employed by scrupulous doctors to combat any female ailments. Those doctors believed it was masturbation that caused all those ailments. Oh my God, Luther, what are you covered in? He's not even camera fit right now. What is it, and are we certain it's bad? Oddly enough, I found Ew, get your pollen-encrusted tail out of this book. Oddly enough, I found little evidence that anyone ever asked this question. That doesn't stop Mr. Fowler from answering it. And so to ease any awkwardness, let us be the ones to pose the question. Mr. Fowler, is masturbation unhealthy for females? Block quote by way of answer. Must our girls by millions thus palsy their whole female nature and offspring by masturbation, and virgin victims by the 100,000 crowd her house whose steps take hold on hell? The very flower of their sex die off thus polluted? Must such vast numbers, adapted to be our best wives and mothers, earth's greatest blessings, become our worst vampire harpies? Can that combination exist? In D&D, maybe. Each someone's daughter, but for their fall, luxurious wives and mothers of future millions? Polluted, hell, vampire harpies. I believe our distinguished man of letters is saying, yes, masturbation is not healthful and ought to be avoided. Why? Well, simply look at nature as it exists around you and do the math. Or let Mr. Fowler do it for you, poor lamb. Block quote. By requiring both sexes to cooperate in creating life, nature forbids all amatory action of men with men, women with women, man with himself, woman with herself, and commands that all amatory action shall be between a male and female. This works in much the same way as by requiring dirt to grow food. Nature expressly forbids the eating of pie on top of hay bales. Pretty obvious, really. I'd like to take this time to tell you a little story about homophobia. My dear brother Jareth and I were with our friend Elf at Disney's Animal Kingdom. If you're not aware, Disney's Animal Kingdom is home to a sizable herd of Ankole or Watusi cattle. The time we were there, this herd was headed by 2 bulls. These 2 bulls were not remotely interested in the rest of the herd. So, this woman, ostensibly some sort of Christian fundamentalist, says to the tour guide, "That's sick. Someone should separate them." And the guide says, "If you would like to try, be my guest." So yes, it does in fact occur in nature. Most anti-masturbation advocates believed masturbation was not something a person learned naturally. The idea of a small child ever finding cause to touch herself above the knees and below the navel was preposterous. All the good bits are outside this equator of sin, darling. Your arms are for filling out pretty puffed sleeves, your feet for walking very quietly so as not to increase mother's suffering from her sick headache. Therefore, masturbation was considered something taught by bad people to innocent ones. Fowler weeps for the trials that await the pure child. Block quote. A covered, slimy, filthy, poisoning slough underlies your paths, more vile than can be described, destructive to all your rosy cheeks, your happy hours, your lifelong joys and powers, and whose fatal blight you can never free yourselves. It is, oh, and he capitalized it. It is masturbation or self-pollution, and consists in handling your private parts while indulging vulgar sexual feelings, by imagining impure pleasures with your opposite sex. It is taught by bad boys and girls, and worse men and women, often by nurses, learned the most in day and boarding schools, academies and colleges, and practiced almost universally from 5 years old up. He even names the women most likely to indulge in it. block quote, almost all factory operatives of both sexes learn and practice it. French drugstores sell an invention used expressly and only for female masturbation. A grass widow, a woman abandoned by a bored husband, owned leaving 2 husbands because she preferred this solitary vice. You can take care of yourself better than a man can? Scandal. Heaven defend us. Divorcees? French textile workers? The very worst of the worst. Page 286, heading, Death by masturbation. What a way to go. I feel obligated to mention, my sweet friend, that here we are going to wade around in the shallowest waters of a black and bottomless swamp. Here we go with Florida man again. Victorian attitudes toward masturbation splash about in the ridiculous, but take one step too far and the lake bed plummets from under you. You'll find yourself cracking your skull on the jagged bedrock of shame, mutilation, and unspeakable cruelty. If you knew the things I know, you'd never be able to eat a bowl of Kellogg's cereal again. Just having to stare at the family name would make you snap, crackle, and pop with rage. You know what? I need to cuddle a cat right now to calm down. Come here, buddy. Oh my God, he actually came when called. I don't believe this. There. He booped my nose. He booped my nose. In fact, we may start with Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. He was absolutely convinced that nearly every female malady that didn't come from clogged bowels came from masturbation. Great, now I'm covered in yuck. The original cornflakes, incidentally, were invented to help combat both. Take your tail out of my book and let me drink my beer. In his 1881 book, Plain Facts for Old and Young, we are told just some of the life-threatening conditions this habit caused in women and girls. Cat hair. Ulceration about the roots of the nails and finger warts. Blech. Cat hair. Caused by the fingers' constant contact with the acrid, irritating secretions of the vagina. Acrid? Acrid? It's not a Venus flytrap, sir! It doesn't ooze acids to dissolve the flesh of its struggling prey. We've had horror movies to that effect, but those are just movies. Uterine disease. This vague diagnosis results from constant congestion of a sexually stimulated womb. Also, it was believed that women engaged in clitoral, vaginal, and uterine masturbation. I could not find a record of how we might go about exciting our uteruses to a sexual frenzy. I can only picture a woman slapping her own belly pink in the privacy of her chamber and feeling very let down by the results. Cancer of the womb. Degeneration of this delicate organ also occurs as the result of the constant irritation and congestion, and is often of a malignant nature, occasioning a most painful death. It's uterine cancer, madam. But you brought it on yourself, didn't you, trollop? Must not rant, must not rant, must not rant. Beer prevents ranting. Sterility and fragility. A total loss of sexual desire and inability to participate in the sexual act is another condition which is declared by medical authors to be most commonly due to previous habits of self-abuse. Here we have an example of a very simple principle that doctors like Kellogg never seemed to consider in their Research. Causation versus correlation. Does masturbation cause sexual disinterest? Or do the two merely correlate, perhaps due to some wild, unexamined factor, like the lackluster ministrations of a now snoring husband? Menstrual derangements. He just has to use such dramatic words for common things. Heavy flow days. Is that so hard to say? Must a woman's period be likened to an escaped mental patient wielding a shiv carved from a spoon? Precocious puberty. Puberty is not considered precocious by modern medical standards unless it sets in before the age of 8. The Mayo Clinic of the 21st century helpfully lists all the information it has about the condition, which is extensive, on its website. Then, regarding the factors causing precocious puberty that it hasn't decoded, it does something truly fantastic. The leading medical minds of our generation say, we don't know why. How much pain was caused and progress thwarted by the Victorian medical community's unwillingness to say those 4 words. It's so much easier to blame the unknown on the unseen. Prolapsus and various displacements of the female organs. I'm sorry, Dr. Kellogg, but I refuse to believe that I can masturbate my private parts until they fall off me. That they simply cannot be that loosely attached. Yeah. Uncontrollable itching that leads to public masturbation. Continued congestion produces a terrible itching of the genitals, which increases until the individual is in a state of actual frenzy, and the disposition to manipulate the genitals becomes irresistible and is indulged even in the presence of friends or strangers, and though the patient be at other times a young woman of unexceptionable modesty. The doctor himself hasn't ever seen this happen, but this other doctor wrote him that some patient's mom heard about it from their neighbor. She lives in Canada. You don't know her. Small breasts. Oh dear. You used all your sexual power to clog up your filthy bits, and there was none left over to make a bosom. Oh, that's a shame. Oh, and look, just about every woman in your family for generations was a chronic masturbator too. How else to explain this disturbing trait repeated so often? And don't try that old I am as God made me line on me, Miss Busyfingers. Do you really think he intended you to have a body shape that varies from the one I personally find most attractive? Atrophied breasts. Another term for when a breast loses fatty tissue and begins to droop, caused by chronic masturbation, or by having breasts. Spinal conditions. Fine. Sure. Toss that on the pile. Nervous disorders, including insanity. But in females, the greatest injury results from the nervous exhaustion which follows the unnatural excitement. Nervous diseases of every variety are developed. Emaciation and debility become more marked even than in the male, and the worst results are produced sooner, being hastened by the sedentary habits of these females generally. Insanity is more frequently developed than in males. This, of course, includes hysteria, which encompasses any diseases missed on the preceding list. It is not fair of me to spit such vitriol without allowing you, my intelligent companion, some explanation. I won't burden you with details, which are found abundantly in Dr. Kellogg's many books on women's illnesses and the personality flaws that cause them. But I will give you his prescribed treatment to cure nymphomania, described as a condition in which there is such an intense degree of sexual excitement that the passions become uncontrollable. A female suffering with this affection will sometimes commit the grossest breaches of chastity. Its principal causes are self-abuse and a complete abandonment of the mind to lascivious thoughts. Again, that just kind of sounds like Dragon Con. Grossest breaches of chastity. That could generally be Dragon Con's tagline if you've ever been there. To the unchaste woman he deigns to suggest this treatment, block quote, cool sitz baths, the cool enema, a spare diet, the application of blisters, which is carbolic acid, and other irritants to the sensitive parts of the sexual organs, the removal of the clitoris and nymphaea, which is the labia minora, constitute the most proper treatment. Today we call that female genital mutilation. He also recommends it for masturbators. The same measures of treatment are indicated in the cases in which the disposition to practice self-abuse is uncontrollable by other means. Please remember, his medical advice on self-abuse was intended for women and girls. Darling, as we have gone on this journey together, we have always endeavored to keep an open mind. We have often been baffled by the past, even wryly amused. But we have made an effort not to condemn the people who lived in it for the 150 or so years of knowledge they hadn't acquired. You best come back here, you're getting cuddled in a second. I suspend this rule on this topic and this man, because this isn't the slow and invisible accumulation of white lead, or the ever-with-us vanity of trying to cut a fashionable figure. This is brutality in an age proud to have outgrown that designation. Simply put, this time they should have known better. I shall try to communicate my feelings in the most ladylike and reserved manner of which I am able. I simply hate you, Dr. Kellogg. Another century's worth of questionable medical practice toward women. Your quackery takes the sugarless, spiceless, fibrous cornflake cake. As much as Mr. Fowler might rave at the moon, you are worse. Because you had power. You are horrible, misogynistic, and too busy designing new enema attachments to be attentive to the thousands of patients putting their lives in your famous hands. If you were on fire, I would not urinate on you to extinguish your agony, not only because it would be but a portion of the pain you'd inflicted on others, but also because I'm sure that instead of gratitude, you would have me committed for flagrant display of my peculiar peeing on immolated jackasses fetish. I really couldn't have put that one better myself, not without copious use of the 7 words you can't say on television. 291. Signs of secrets. Oh! Do wait. Though we may not trust Kellogg, who tells us that we should suspect any little girl showing excessive fondness for mustard, pepper, vinegar, spices, and other stimulating condiments, and that little girls who are very fond of cloves and desire to be always eating them are likely to be depraved in other respects. What? We always try to heed the stark truths our Mr. Fowler hurls at our heads. There are many ways, he tells us, to spot the telltale signs of the woman who practices the secret vice. Block quote. She complains of being cold. Nothing equally robs the system of animal warmth and causes icy cold hands, feet, and skin, just as a right sexual state warms. She has trouble with her gravel. And consumption, of course. This strain induces costiveness, liver complaints, gravel difficulties, which are kidney stones, dyspepsia, consumption, etc., by breaking down the weakest organs and inducing death in the name of other diseases. She feels sad and achy and has trouble with her pee. Her self-abuse induces a gnawing, faint, sunken, gone, distressed feeling around stomach and heart, and morbidity throughout. The urinary function suffers most. She has tiny nipples, etc. Doing you-know-what dwarfs the sexual organs of both sexes, testes, penile, mammal, pubic, and pelvic, nipples included. Moving on. Somehow it is much more palatable coming from Fowler. I respect a man who believes his message is so important that he can't bother with standard punctuation. I.e., we know this dude's crazy, so we can just sort of laugh and shake our heads. 292 heading, Sin or Insanity, but seldom both. One thing Kellogg did do that I can reluctantly commend. He at least made sexual information, however wrong, available to the common person. Few were doing that. In fact, it was often argued that topics of a sexual nature should be discussed exclusively by medical men and religious leaders in Latin. Only men of the highest caliber could read Latin in the 19th century. Well, men with rich fathers who sent them to fine colleges. But that was pretty much the same thing at the time. Therefore, heated debates of whether or not accidentally getting an erection should be a confessable sin were intelligible only to the prurient-minded, as no sexually malformed individual would be capable of retaining a language of such holy beauty in their diseased minds. Shush you. The famous German physician Karl Kappelmann, who wrote 1879's Pastoral Medicine, a book intended to help priests figure out dilemmas just like that one, wrote mostly in English, reserving Latin for only the dirtiest of mental word pictures, such as words that translate into impure touch. And no, by the way, it was not a sin so long as the erection was accidental. As for women, they do not become accidentally stimulated, says the doctor, but they do often tell him that they use masturbation to ease internal pain. This should be no surprise, says the doctor. Lust is pain. Block quote. Such patients often assert, amongst other things, that they experience relief from pain through practicing self-abuse in a more or less complete way. Pressing or rubbing of the clitoris, etc. It may indeed appear so to the patient, for pain and lust meet each other and may alternate in hysterical persons whose nervous system is so much perverted, but this can never make self-abuse allowable to these patients. Even if the woman in question is not seeking or receiving sexual gratification from this act, she is absolutely seeking and receiving sexual gratification from this act. She is sinning and must be penitent. Unless her masturbation habit has rendered her an idiot, too crazy to understand sin. Block quote. These practices, as resulting from a morbid condition of the body, may not appear sinful to them, but they are, nevertheless, materially, an unnatural and illicit gratification of the sexual instinct, The priest cannot allow it, but should he think the psychical conditions of the patient changed to such a degree that sin cannot be imputed to her, then she is only so far responsible as she may have been originally guilty of causing or encouraging her abnormal condition, and her case no longer has its place in foro conscientiae, and must be subjected to the treatment of the physician of the insane, and must invariably be referred to him. She's still on the hook for the masturbating she did before she went insane, however. And never be fooled by a woman who is too bashful to spread her genitals before a physician while saying, "My priest said I'm abusing myself so much I'm going to go insane. Could you take a look?" If a woman winces at the thought of that encounter, she's all but signed her own confession. Block quote. The pretext of repugnance to medical examination and consultation should not be easily credited. A really chaste woman will be made so unhappy through the condition above described, and will detest the desires and practices of self-abuse arising therefrom to such a degree that she certainly will not refuse a decent medical consultation, if she is told that she may entertain a well-grounded hope of being in this way freed from her physical affliction and moral danger. Definitely need a beer. Page 295, heading. You can wash it once. In their 1889 publication, Sexual Health, a companion to Modern Domestic Medicine, Henry G. Hanchett and Alexander Hamilton Laidlaw break the unfortunate news that our vaginas are so troublesome we're bound to be miserable no matter what we do with them. Even if you're a good girl and never, ever, ever touch it, well, much to our astonishment, that can prove to be equally unhealthy. Block quote. Young girls frequently have so impressed upon them an idea of the shamefulness of touching the privates, in fact, in some cases, almost of the disgrace of having privates at all, that cleanliness of those parts is neglected with far worse than ordinary consequences. It is not infrequently happens that persistent itching and discomfort, nervousness, irritability, peevish restlessness, discontent, melancholy, and even mental disturbance occur in girls and unmarried women who have been taught never to touch the privates. At the private Catholic school that I went to, they told us in middle school that yeast infections were in fact sexually transmitted diseases. My 13-year-old self became very alarmed. You see, we had just taken our aging hound mix to the vet, and our dear sweet veterinarian had diagnosed Spot as having a yeast infection in her ear. You can imagine the scene that ensued. Spoiler alert, it resulted in me getting chucked out of class. This can be remedied, but if you didn't want to touch it before, oh dear, you're really not going to want to now. A woman's vaginal complaints may be completely cured by simply separating the large and smaller lips that are found on either side of the vagina and cleaning out from the furrow between them a mass of cheesy matter, the accumulated discharge of the glands at that point. Oh dear. Oh heavens. You know, if you have your Cards Against Humanity set handy, you might want to use one of the blank cards for that. Oh, and to be sure the problem doesn't recur, one must bathe that insidious troublemaker at least once a month. Block quote. So greatly have very serious symptoms been benefited in so many cases by this simple procedure that it must be thought an important matter to Instruct girls and women to separate these lips and wash between them at least once a month, and in warm weather, say from May to November, as often as once a week. Maybe one of these people had ever visited Georgia. I don't know. Society made women so terrified of their own bodies that they were too scared to wash an area in glaring, odorous, painful need of it. After all, if you had been taught that your vagina was dirty, it would surprise you to find that it was actually dirty, wouldn't it? Oh, gracious, I do believe that whole chapter was just one big fit of hysteria. I am beginning to see why they were so popular. We have one more chapter left in Unmentionable, the Victorian Lady's Guide to Sex, Marriage, and Manners. I can't wait to start my next book for y'all. And if you have anything that you'd like to suggest, something you'd like to hear me read, you are welcome to contact me on Instagram at serenity_sweet13, on Twitter at serenitysweet13, no underscore. If you found my YouTube channel through Facebook, feel free to contact me on Facebook, or direct message me or comment right here on YouTube. Give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and tomorrow we'll jump right into this conclusion. Luther's over there where I can't reach him, or he'd be saying bye too. We are still dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic, and I would just like to remind you, we're here to take care of each other. We're here to be good to each other. Don't be a dick, okay? Don't be a jerk. Be nice to people. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes, from maintaining social distance. I love y'all, and I will be back with you as soon as I can.